Hello, this is the Stephen Harriet Show by Catholic Vote, and I'm Stephen Harriet. So this week, like every week it seems, we've had another flurry of tiresome, phony, shallow political theater on both the left and the right. Are you fooled? I'm not. I think fewer and fewer of us are. What I'm getting at is this all started with a presser where Donald Trump was talking about immigration, and particularly he was asked a question about the gang MS-13. And he said of MS-13 gang members,
"These aren't people. These are animals."
Immediately, enemies of border enforcement ran with the quotation, and they made it look like Donald Trump was saying that about innocent 10-year-old South American girls and immigrants in general. But again, the context was Donald Trump was saying that members of MS-13, a violent gang that really could be compared to ISIS, this is a gang that disembowels and rapes and slaughters people, he was calling them animals. First of all, real quick, this is regular language. This is not extraordinary. People call other people animals when they get mad all the time, but more on that later. Anyway, like I said, very few of us were fooled, and in the end, it was very embarrassing because this coordinated effort by virtually every powerful news outlet was caught red-handed, misquoting Donald Trump and trying to use the misquote against border enforcement. The Associated Press even was forced to delete a tweet. CNN even started reporting it accurately, and Jake Tapper set the record straight as well. But some commentators on the left, like cats that you catch falling ungracefully, sleeked their fur, arched their shoulders, and tried to pretend like they meant to do that. So they went from saying Trump said all immigrants are animals and that's wrong, to saying, no, Trump said MS-13 members were animals. We knew that all along, and what we meant all along is that saying they're animals is wrong. So they all of a sudden had developed this totally inviolable principle that they were stuck defending against ever calling anyone an animal, even though this is totally regular language that most of us use all the time. But again, more on that later. What happened with this MS-13 dust-up is a perfect example of a problem that I'm seeing more and more on both the left and the right. People being opportunistic and letting the narratives of a given news cycle completely shape what they think and say. They ride the mob's mood and the media narratives like morally meaningless waves of opportunities to make themselves look really morally meaningful to their audiences. Which is to say, these people are not acting morally at all, and they don't answer to any kind of a higher power. They answer to the mob, whether it's a rightist mob or a leftist mob. And as a Catholic, I'm embarrassed to say that one of the worst offenders this time around was Jesuit Father James Martin, editor of America Magazine. At first, basing his talking points on the media-driven lie that Donald Trump had just said that all migrants are animals, he tweeted, "Calling people animals is sinful. Every human being has infinite dignity. Moreover, this is the same kind of language that led to the extermination of Jews, who were called vermin in Germany, and of Tutsi, who were called cockroaches in Rwanda. This kind of language cannot be normalized. It is a grave sin." And after it became very obvious that he was working with false information, he tweeted a follow-up. To be clear, even members of MS-13 are not animals. Every human being has dignity, even the worst criminals, even murderers. The main danger of the animal language is that it begins with criminals and then is applied to entire classes of people, i.e. migrants, Tutsi, Jews. Yeah, and I suppose arresting people for murder is just a prerequisite for eventually arresting everybody. Here's the thing. When you're operating not according to any moral truth, but just pandering to the mob, you end up getting cornered by the mob. And to please the mob that you've allowed to corner you, you end up saying and doing things that are deeply immoral. For example, Father Martin just wanted to compare Trump to Hitler, something that his leftist audience loves hearing, but in the process, he wound up comparing Jewish Holocaust victims to MS-13. What Father Martin tweeted came across as anti-Semitic, as trivializing the Holocaust just to score some cheap political points, and most of all, as demagoguery, which is all about aggrandizing yourself by amorally pandering to the people. I mean, like I said, it's not like Father Martin has some eternal unbending principle against ever using the word animal to describe someone you're mad at. If anything, he just uses this prissy language policing act against his petty political enemies when they say the word animal. Okay, now, two things here. Like I said, using the word animal is totally normal language. Most of the time, just calling people that name, it's just an ordinary insult. For instance, mainstream lefty commentator Ana Navarro, a Catholic, said Donald Trump was an animal in 2016, with apologies to animals. Pope Francis himself recently said this about priests who refused to baptize the babies of unwed mothers.
Erano animali.
Father Martin never spawned any menacing conspiracy theories about how dangerous it was for Ana Navarro to compare people like Trump to animals, and he never accused the Holy Father of trying to dehumanize and drum up a pogrom to go lynch radical traditionalist priests. But he did suggest that calling members of MS-13 animals could only be construed as Trump and Trump supporters trying to build up a genocidal society that would dehumanize Latinos and eventually even commit genocide against American Latinos. That's an outrageously offensive type of scapegoating accusation that Father Martin reserves for trying to pin on his political enemies, which is border enforcement advocates. But just a few weeks ago, when Donald Trump himself called Syrian President Bashar al-Assad an animal in the ramp-up to what could have been a war that Syrian and Iraqi bishops said would lead to Middle Eastern Christians being subjected to genocide, Father Martin was silent. This isn't moral principle. This is shallow, self-aggrandizing political theater. Now look, I don't blame Father Martin for not saying that Ana Navarro and the Holy Father are horrible people for saying that their enemies were animals. Like I said, most of the time, there's nothing very significant about calling people you're mad at animals. It's just ordinary insults, and there's nothing particularly insidious about it. What I do blame Father Martin for is his false, self-aggrandizing moral leadership, where he trumpets his own shining moral uprightness with meticulous, petty language policing when nothing is at stake, because this kind of self-aggrandizing showmanship is neglectful of actual innocence when they are under threat. When it came to Donald Trump's comment about MS-13, Father Martin used the language of strong morality, but not in defense of innocence, because his conspiracy theory about genociding Latinos isn't even real. Innocent lives weren't really at stake. But when meaningfully dehumanizing language is used in ways that actually could precipitate human rights violations, false moral leaders fall silent. Seems like they only act like they care when saying so will make them look good rather than actually defend innocence. And in case you think I'm being partisan, no, the right has the same problem. On the contrary, what I'm saying is trying to solve the fact that we're so partisan. See, look how ugly mobs can be, both right and left. There are a lot of people on the right whose only argument for border enforcement is migrants are violent, murderous animals. It's true. It's embarrassing, and I hate to admit it, but it's true. There are plenty of people like that on the right. Right-wing speakers and even right-wing political candidates, what they do is they march widows of people murdered by drunk drivers who happen to be immigrants out onto the stage, and they tell the sob story, and they morally grandstand, and they emotionally manipulate as if that's an argument. The reason we need border security is because all of the people outside of the U.S. are dangerous criminals is not a great argument. What is that? I mean, it's nothing but bigotry and fearmongering. And it makes the mob like you, but morally indulges the mob and actually confuses the mob while leaving innocents to die for another day. And this brings me to the absolute central point I want to make. If you take anything away from this, I want it to be this. Here's the deal with the border debate. Innocents are actually threatened by the insecure border. And these innocent people are ignored by way too many people on both the right and the left. A lot like minorities in the Middle East, these innocent people being brutalized on the border are the last thing that's considered by any mob-driven demagogue. These people are victimized like you wouldn't believe because of border insecurity and the reign of unpoliced and unregulated people traffickers and cartels. Look it up. It's as bad as the Middle East. But instead, let's have a left-right argument about how we need to keep the border open and insecure because we love the poor and we love the immigrants. Meanwhile, immigrants themselves continue to die, especially illegal ones who are smuggled. Or let's talk about how Democrats are just trying to bring Mexican criminals here to take our jobs and rape our daughters. Or let's send out tweets like Father Martin about how Republicans and Trump supporters are going to commit genocide against South Americans. Only my team can save you from the Democrats, say the Republicans. Only my team can save you from the Republicans, say the Democrats. Hey, mob, follow me and I'll protect you from your political enemies. And meanwhile, innocents continue to suffer and die on the border without so much as being mentioned. Look at me, how good I am. This is not Christian. This is not working. It's not going anywhere. It's all theater. So what does good moral leadership look like? For an example, look at Tucker Carlson lately. I mean, he's not perfect, but at least he took the side of genocide victims and potential genocide victims in the Middle East versus the American pro-war push. And at least this week, he pointed out to a guest who MS-13's main victims are.
MS-13 preys upon immigrants I mean, who do you think their victims are? Overwhelmingly Honduran, Salvadoran immigrants, often illegal, by the way.
Illegal immigrants on the border. During this debate over MS-13, Father Martin didn't mention any of that. Instead, he just talked about how evil his rightist enemies are. Father Martin, I hate to break it to you, but you're not taking some kind of meaningful moral stand against some imaginary right-wing genocide. You're just feeding chest-thumping partisan rage, and the mob is lapping it up. But just remember, when you do this petty moral grandstanding about rude language, you're actually more like the stereotypical bigoted right-wing fearmongering pundit than most right-wing pundits are. You know why? Because unlike Rush Limbaugh, you're not a snarky, cigar-chewing, secular entertainer celebrity. Or at least you're not supposed to be. You're a priest. You're a caretaker for the least of these brethren. And you're a moral leader in my Roman Catholic Church. Use that vocation to morally lead people. And stop letting the mob lead you. In any case, in the long run, everyone's going to see through it, and even the mob will turn on you. And as for you right-wing commentators, and that goes for you, too. This is the Stephen Harriott Show, the show that's so truthful its fact-checking department is in heaven. I'm your host, Stephen Harriott.